So that's Tejas in their elections. Tejas. What about Peru?
Oh, fam, don't. No, just say it
Fam,
the white man
banter.
way.
They love this.
Okay, so Peru's elections, of course, are coming to a close. The election is June 6th. I will be there. These candidates had the last debate. The two candidates are Pedro Castillo and Keiko Fujimori. And they couldn't be more opposite if they tried. I mean, I guess they could. He could be more to the left, but she is pretty far right. The difference in the voting, right? It used to be about a 9-point difference where Pedro Castillo was leading. It has dwindled to about a margin of error within 2.5% around that. So Bloomberg had an article and they referenced several other pieces that were in Spanish because a lot of these, of course, the journalism and the elections that are happening right now are in Spanish. And I wanted to point out a couple things. They had a simulation by El Comercio Ipsos. And according to that simulation, thus far, and this is slide 27, Castillo would get 51.1% in the June 6th election compared to 48.9% for Fujimori within the polls, or a plus or minus 2.52% point margin of error. About 20% of voters are still undecided. Again, kind of like here, most voters will decide that day. Now, I wanted to point out, too, so you guys could see how the percentage has dwindled. And you can see from the 14th of May to the 28th of May and how that percentage has changed. And it's definitely gotten smaller. Part of the reason that that's gotten smaller is because there was an attack in an area that was blamed to have ties with the Shining Path.
There we go.
And so they were tying it to him. There was a letter, and I think I put that in the folder, but I feel like this is a setup. It's just been so much like crap against this guy, calling him a communist when he actually is not really that much of a hardcore leftist at all. So the next slide, Oz, 29, I wanted to point out a couple things. At the very top where Oz has it, you can see that the region. So Keiko Fujimori is popular in Lima, which is the capital of Peru. It has more of a modernized cosmopolitan area. There is definitely less indigenous people there. There is more of a capitalist mindset in that region. So she's definitely far more popular. And she's from the party, just reminding everybody, Fuerza Popular, which means popular force, like literally. And his party is Peru Libre, Free Peru. And you can see Lima, she's at 52%. He's at 26%. The interior, which is like the central part of Peru, kind of a little bit, not in the full center, but a little bit more inside. You can see he's at 46%. She's at 30%. In the north, she is at 39%, while he's at 33%. In the actual center, where it's a more rural area, she's at 30% and he's at 53%. Mm-hmm. And in the south, he has the lead at 59% to her 20%. And in Oriente, which is Oriente means the east, 46% to 27%.
Where are you going, by the way?
I'm going to Lima.
So you're going to go to an area which would be very heavily for Keiko.
For Keiko.
We think that. That's what they're saying, right?
That's what the polls are saying. Now, the polling there, I haven't really seen discrepancies. The mainstream media, obviously, there, just like here, favors her. All of the Peruvian people that are journalists here that live in Miami and are American speaking, or all the expats from Peru, say it's a very difficult situation for us, but we have to vote for her because never communism. There's a very strong anti-communist sentiment in Peru, but he's not a communist. So he's like a labor union type of strike, like a teacher candidate. It would be like running somebody from the teachers union and who is a little bit more conservative on social issues.
Yeah.
And that's really what it would be like. He's not the more leftist one. I do feel like his party, though, has more leftist ideals. They were talking about rewriting the Peruvian constitution. They were talking about really cutting ties with the U.S. military and the U.S. influence, which is a good thing. And the problem they have is that the constant comparison to Venezuela and Hugo Chavez, and of course, subsequently Maduro, because the Venezuelans are living in Peru. And according to every Peruvian that I've talked to, including my family members, there's a lot of crime that is coming from Venezuelans, which has caused them to sort of have this xenophobic attitude towards Venezuelans and say, well, ask Venezuelans if they would vote for Castillo. So that's the whole thing. Like, and any sort of tie to communism that the mainstream media is warping on this dude is what's causing the pushback. Now, simultaneously, of course, she is the daughter of the dictator Alberto Fujimori, who killed, and he's in prison right now for murdering people, for especially farm workers, etc., as a retaliation to the shining path. So that was the whole thing. He was a dictator. His daughter, as soon as she gets in, believe you me, she will pardon her father. And she's also has accusations against her and charges against her that she needs to respond to. This is like her third or fourth time running. So obviously she's really, like, there's a lot on this election, right? So just giving you guys a heads up on that.
I want to also just point out really quick, fam, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because, I was watching a lot of Whitney Webb when it comes to the situation in Peru.
Yeah.
Fujimoto is more like
Fujimori, yeah.
Yeah, she's a capitalist. She's a corporatist.
Global capitalist.
Global capitalist.
Pro-police.
Yeah. Whereas if...
Pedro Castillo
is more of, I don't want to say the word nationalist, but he wants to nationalize all the natural resources. When he has this leftist mindset, he wants to make sure labor, those people get paid.
Right.
Peru is sitting on a lot of lithium and minerals, okay? Yeah. They have enough lithium here really to just enrich their whole fucking country the way Venezuela did years ago.
They should be rich. Just like Venezuela should be for oil, Peru should in regards to minerals, as should Bolivia.
Yeah. They have that lithium. You know what I'm saying? And stuff like that. And that's why this election is so important to the West, because they're going to want her to win, not Castillo. Because if Castillo gets it and nationalizes his natural resources, forget about it. Those people will be eating well. They'll be healthy. They'll have medicine. They'll have schools. They can rebuild their whole economy on the lithium they're sitting on. But once again, we always go in there, the West. We support the party that's going to let our corporate entities come in there, make all the money, extract all the resources. It's resource extraction. And they want this lithium, just like our boy Elon Musk said, well, cool, we want a coup. That's why they did it in Bolivia. They're going to be trying to do the same thing here in Peru. That's why I don't believe those numbers are even remotely close when they talk about, oh, it's almost within 2.5. Bullshit. The people of Peru aren't stupid. They understand if Castillo gets in, the nationalized labor, okay, the labor movement will be just uplifted, those resources, whatnot. So that's why this election is so important right now for the future. They sit on the lithium triangle.
I agree. But I think, unfortunately, Pasta, I do think it's close because, trust me, the amount of just hatred and fear that people have for anything remotely communist is very alive and well. Especially, weirdly enough, in the younger populations. Actually, in one of those charts, 18 to 25-year-olds were actually favoring her slightly over Pedro Castillo. The reason being because 18 to 25-year-olds do not remember Fujimori. That they don't recall Fujimori and what he did. So they're going to forget that. They're also not going to really recall the shining path. But at the same time, there's also that influence of like, oh, let's give young people this whole new idea of Western capitalism and Hollywood and America. People still in Peru think America is a great country, and they still kind of fetishize it in a way that is no longer true of America. But the propaganda is so strong against anything remotely leftist. I mean, I can't tell you. I don't know of a single family member of mine that is pro Castillo.
Yeah,
I mean, most of my family is in Lima, of course, but even then, I mean, even, it's just so, I mean, my mother, she was like, God, she's such a psychopath, but my mother is more leftist, and, and then there's my dad, and he's like, yeah, but we can't have communism. So it's crazy to me. It's so frustrating when I see these things, because I know that it's the same playbook here where you vilify a person to make them look like what they did to Bernie Sanders, made him out to look like a commie when we know he's a social democrat, if that, right? And so like that's the same thing at play here. So last week, the technical teams from each party debated, and this is something I hadn't heard of ever happening in other countries, but it happens in Peru where they have like the teams from the parties debate too and have a conversation before the candidates have a conversation. So I thought that was interesting, and that maybe perhaps we could actually implement that in other. Is
that them right there on the stage and stuff?
That's them.
So you're saying that like it's not just the individuals, it's the parties, like they have people. That is awesome.
Yeah, I think like, that's a great
team
idea.
Debate, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So the Convo Couch, the three of us will take on the three people at TYT. Let's go.
Oh God,
they'll
never agree to that.
Tag me in.
So the candidates, of course, debated yesterday. Okay, it was their final debate before the second round of elections on June 6th. And according to the polls, he won the debate. Pedro Castillo won the debate. According to votes from people of the Republic. So you guys can see in this chart, the next one, Oz, it should be that one. That one's fine.
That one, right? The number 2032 or 33, Oz. Oh, he's got it up. My bad.
Yeah. Okay. So Pedro Castillo, according to this poll, he won by 56.8% to 43.2% of Keiko's. And of course, the debate actually took place on Sunday night, the 30th of May, in the Aula Magna Simón Bolívar de la Universidad Nacional de San Agustín. So it was a university in Arequipa. Arequipa is another city in Peru, and that's where this debate took place. Now, what did they focus on in this debate? I watched the debate. They focused on the majority of key issues, including mining, the pandemic, the economy, women's violence, because that is a very big thing there in Mexico as well, and how to handle education, among other topics, right? And what I saw basically, just you can leave it on there. I'm just going to talk a little bit, because what I saw basically in that debate was that he was focused more on getting the people back their money, because there's a lot of exploitations of these miners, and his focus was to say we want them to get their fair share, and we want to stop the exploitation of the miners. So while he was saying that, they were trying to paint him as, oh, he's going to take away your property, he's going to take away your land, he's going to take away your savings and your houses, because that's what their idea of communism, you abolish property. Really, that does happen in communism eventually, but that's the abolishment of property. So they were trying to say that he was going to take away everybody's property and like make it out to be like this thing. And he was like, I'm not going to take away your property. I actually want you guys to have more money and more savings. And I come from a teacher's background where, we're rural farmers, and we want people to have the what they deserve, especially when they're being exploited in Peru. And we wanted to get rid of the people who are just exploiting our country. We want to reduce the outside foreign interference. That's pretty much what he was focused on, while she was promising a lot of things that I have a hard time thinking she'll deliver. She was promising on paying people with some loans that they could pay back later, which isn't that great. She was promising more access to vaccination, and using the whole I'm a woman, so you should vote for me, and women empowerment, etc. But one thing I wanted to point out is that Pedro Castillo does think people should be vaccinated, does want to open Peru to more vaccination, because right now only certain groups are getting vaccination, but he wants to use the Sputnik vaccine. He specifically mentioned the Sputnik vaccine, which is really interesting to me in the context of everything going on. And also, when I've seen previous interviews of him in the rural areas, they weren't even wearing masks, and he was saying how like, well, it's different here, And so he doesn't see, it seems like he's saying yes to the vaccines, but he's also like, let's try this other vaccine. He didn't mention the US vaccine.
So wait a second, fam. You're telling me that Pedro Castillo in the debate concentrated on not letting the West come in there and take their natural resources, but instead using their natural resources in the mining fields to enrich their own country for the people of Peru and give their laborers a decent working salary?
Yes.
What a tanky motherfucker.
And he wanted healthcare to be nationalized, like
tanky.
national healthcare and education too,
Tommy.
like free education. So he was promoting basically like, you know, progressive values, education for all,
How dare he.
healthcare for all. And she was beating around the bush. Now, she was also, one of the things that really alarmed me about Keiko was in one of the discussions of how to deal with what's happening in Peru, which there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of theft. She wants to bring in the police everywhere. She literally said, I want to have we need to empower the police, and we need to have them everywhere that there are reports of theft. Now, you could say, oh, well, yeah, if there's a lot of stealing, if there's a lot of crime, then you need the police. But it just sounded very Orwellian and draconian to me, the way she was preaching it. Like, you're just going to have a bunch of cops there and they're going to be pretty militant and ask people, what are you doing, where you're going? That's kind of what I'm thinking she would take it. And it's really scary because are there poor people? It's because you're not giving them like the necessary means to live. So they're stealing. And then, of course, you have the incoming of Venezuelans, which they'll blame on Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro, who is now in power.
Yeah.
But they won't talk about the sanctions. They won't talk about why Venezuelans are escaping. And that's something that needs to be addressed as well. And again, Evo Morales and others have reached out to Pedro Castillo, have given their blessings to him, saying how important it is that he wins instead of Keiko Fujimori. So that was a picture of them at the debate that he just showed. And I just want to read a little bit out more about it so you guys can get more of an idea of what happened. So according to this article from Reuters, they sparred in a debate. They did. I mean, they were pretty, she was especially vocally harsh on him. This was talked about an increase in public spending. Right-wing Keiko Fujimori offered cash handouts and bonuses as socialist Pedro Castillo proposed increased universal pensions. He wants universal pensions. She wants one-time cash handouts. Who knows how much she would actually do it. The pair are neck and neck in opinion polls just 1 week ahead of the country's polarized presidential election. The ballot could tilt the country. A relative safe haven for investors in Latin America sharply to the left, or see the controversial Fujimori family return to power. On Sunday, Fujimori, the daughter of jailed former President Alberto Fujimori, unveiled a proposal to seek more contributions from the country's mining companies. Castillo, an elementary school teacher, has previously proposed raising taxes on miners. And I think, let me go back here. And then the election frontrunner, Pedro Castillo, said on Saturday he would review contracts with foreign miners in the copper-rich country and set a deal for Russia's Sputnik V vaccine. So again, it's not like he's trying to raise taxes on the poor miners. He's trying to raise taxes on the people in charge of them, right? The elites that are in charge of them, the class that's in charge of them. Castillo leads in the polls ahead of a runoff vote on June 6th against right-wing opponent Keiko Fujimori in a polarized election that can move the Andean nation sharply to the left, a trend that has rattled markets and worried miners. Exactly. By miners in this context that Reuters is talking about, because you got to understand, but he's talking about the business, the people in charge of the mining business. I'm talking about, Pedro Castillo is talking about the workers that are making those people rich. Yeah. There's a difference. So he wants to empower the workers while simultaneously the Keiko Fujimori wants to empower the business people in charge. This is why her support in another chart, in a breakdown, comes from the upper echelons of the class in Peru. So this is, again, a definite class type of election where you're going to have the poor rural workers against the more urban, like not urban, but like cosmopolitan, metropolitan, upper class, whiter population as well. And they were talking about how he was dressed. He dresses very much like with a hat and stuff, very rural. And he wants to rewrite the country's constitution to weaken the business elite and give the state a more dominant role in the economy. He talked about how foreign firms had plundered Peru, and he didn't want that. He would ensure that 70% of profits would remain in Peru, because a lot of the things that are happening right now, and even in speaking to my mother, you know, she was arguing. It was funny. She was arguing with my father. She was like, all of the money that Peru makes literally goes elsewhere. They're not keeping all of this money inside the country. So he's talking about stopping that. So if you're talking about 70% of it, he wants all of that to remain in Peru instead of going elsewhere. Again, why is one of the countries that is richest in natural resources still poor? That doesn't make any sense. Why? Because they're getting exploited by the West. And that's one of the things that Pedro Castillo would cut. So
fam, is there also talks about, I mean, I love the fact he wants to nationalize his natural resources. That's what he should do. Are there talks in Peru about the media, how the media controls shit? Because this is important too as well. I'm thinking the whole time, like, who's really running the media over there? And that's why we see a big push for maybe why Castillo kind of loses a couple votes, because they control the media and they transfer all that kind of support over to the imperialist candidate of sorts.
Exactly. The media is very corrupt there too. In one of the few shows we did, I think one of his I forget his name, but it was one of his campaign party members, and he was speaking on behalf of Pedro Castillo, and he basically said the media doesn't talk about how Peru is exploited and the DEA is the largest drug cartel in the world, and the DEA needs to go, and these military officials from the US need to go, and the media doesn't want to talk about that, how we have all this cocaine, but what is happening? I never see any planes coming in. Like where is all this shit coming from? He was talking about all of that. And so it's important to note that the media definitely has a role. And Veronica Castillo, who was the other leftist candidate, I think that she came in third place or something. Her name is Veronica Mendoza, and she came to his defense, right? She came to Castillo's defense and on how the media in certain sectors have portrayed him. So we're going to play a video and I'm going to translate as it goes.
Lo que nosotros percibimos es que ha habido una excesiva demonización, estigmatización, ¿no?
Okay, so she's saying that what I have seen is there's been a demonization and stigmatization.
Digamos, se ha dicho cosas, ¿no? Que en ningún momento
there are things that have been said
presidencial ha propuesto, ¿no?
About the things Pedro Castillo has proposed.
Incluido el que hemos visto el día de hoy, en el que se anuncia que Pedro Castillo va a confiscar los ahorros de los ciudadanos, no se
They have said that he's going to take away the savings
con la realidad. Corresponde más bien a especulaciones, ¿no? De
people, and it's not true. It's been mixed with the reality, and it's not true.
¿No? Y lo que nosotros hemos percibido, porque no voy a negar que por lo menos en términos personales, yo sí tenía ciertos reparos.
And what we have perceived, and I'm not going to deny that I've had my own apprehension of Pedro Castillo.
Desconfianza respecto de lo que podía representar el profesor Castillo. Lo cierto es que en el diálogo y el trabajo con él y con su agrupación política.
The truth is in the dialogue and in in working with him.
Hemos encontrado una disposición a escuchar.
We have found an attempt and a disposition to listen.
Consensos, y no solamente nos lo ha demostrado a nosotros, sino de cara al país.
Not only has he demonstrated this to us, but also
de manera por iniciativa propia, ¿no? Suscribió un compromiso firme con la democracia.
By his own initiative, he has pushed a confident promise towards
las instituciones que ciertamente
democracy and the institutions
formadas, pero bajo los canales institucionales.
And the compromise to democracy in the institutions currently there. So she's saying that he's basically, the mainstream media has been warping it like he's like this communist, like I said, that he's going to go and take everybody's land, everybody's property, everybody's everything. But really, in speaking with him and his party and just talking and like working with them, she has said she has felt like he has given a commitment to like reforming the democracy within the context of Peru, obviously rewriting the constitution, but still not like abolishing private property, not like nationalizing every single thing. I mean, he definitely wants to not make it more of a national country, like a nationally focused country, because right now, like I said, all of Peru's monetary gains are being like taken out of the country and is being exploited. So that's pretty much what she's saying that the mainstream media has done. And another tweet she made here's where she called out Keiko Fujimori in using her identity, because Keiko started talking about being a woman and how she cares about women, etc. Very Hillary Clinton like when I was watching it. And the translation is, she said, a woman who allowed her mother to be tortured, who allowed and now denies the sterilization of thousands of farm working women, who blocked the advancement of women's rights with her caucus, cannot speak on behalf of women. Because during Alberto Fujimori's reign, lots of farm women were sterilized. A vast majority of them were. And even in her mother was also abused. And she, again, there was this whole culture, that this dictatorship that Alberto Fujimori had over the whole country. And that's part of the whole reason why so many people say, Keiko never again. But then the other side is like, well, we can't allow communism in because of the propaganda that this guy's a communist when he isn't. So that's that back and forth. So the important thing I wanted to point out here that I'm still, a little bit apprehensive about is that there's a delegation going to observe Peruvian elections with people from all over the world. One of the groups that's actually going to help and observe, one of the organizations going to represent, is DSA. You know how I feel about DSA. I have never, ever heard of DSA at all, ever being involved in elections or being election specialists. So I'm kind of keen to know why anybody would align themselves with them. Maybe they don't know very much about who DSA is, but this is a new organization called the Progressive International, and they're a year old. They just had their year anniversary not that long ago, and they have like a group of people that are like council members or something, and among them are Naomi Klein, John Cusack, Noam Chomsky, but also Cornel West and others that are less known and more of like at the activist side. So it's interesting. I don't know much about them. I know that they're trying to do something. I'm going to be open to asking them questions, but I would like to know what is their background on election monitoring, because unfortunately, a lot of these groups that go to monitor elections don't know anything about elections. Yeah. And so that's one of the things, like, if we're going to go monitor elections in other countries, you should be asking the basic questions that we would ask. Like, okay, so what kind of paper is this? How is the process? Is it machines? What type of machine is it? Where's the chain of custody? How's it done? What are the ID laws? All these things that I would ask if I was, being an observer of the elections, or at the very least pay attention to. And I know in Peru that you need it's called a DNI. It's like an ID to vote. You need to go and take that vote. And if you don't vote in Peru, you get a penalty for not voting. You are charged a fee for not voting. So you have to vote. Most people vote. And so it's a thing there. Again, just to present to you how it is in other countries. How other countries get penalties, and that's how they have a higher turnout. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be asking a lot of questions. I'm going to be asking people on the ground some questions. I'm going to be trying to figure out how Peru's elections work in the inside. There's obviously going to be differences between how an election is done in Lima, a capital with resources and more money, versus how it's done in like the rural areas, which would be interesting to see. I wish I had time to go. It's more difficult to get there. It's not like I can drive. It's like, I mean, I could, but like it's just more difficult. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be very interesting, fam. I am uber excited that you are going. In a nutshell, they have the same media slanting for the capitalist, globalist kind of candidates. So hopefully that Castillo can fight back against that. I'd like to see the other third place candidate over here kind of going out and supporting Pedro Castillo.
Yeah, she's been giving kind of like, hints.
I have my differences, but you know what? Yes, yada, yada, yada. I like that. It's just going to be interesting all around. How many days of voting is there?
I believe it was the first round and now it's the second round. That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't they need 14 days, fam?
No. No, that's what I'm saying. Like, we don't like, if you're gonna like compare US elections and complain about things, yeah, every country's different. There are different needs, but at the same time, like, look into how other countries run their elections and see, like, are all these countries like racist and all this stuff? Like, no, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of racism in Peru. I mean, that's part of it right now. It's the same thing we saw in Venezuela, the same thing we saw in Bolivia. The indigenous population has different concerns than the population that lives in the city. Obviously, there's a vast difference. There's a vast difference as to how they see things. They want to go back to the older ways of the country. They're kind of more against the whole just industrialization, not because they don't want advancement, but because they know that's going to require or bring in the West as interventionism. And they know, Peru knows, there's a whole sentiment there too, just like there is in Colombia, just like there is in Bolivia, just like there is in Venezuela, that the West needs to stay the hell out. But there's also the fear in Peru in particular, because of what happened with the Shining Path, that they're afraid of a group that's like a radical communist Maoist group taking control. Now, of course, the Shining Path was a very, very small sector of the left, and they were completely denounced by a lot of people on the left. And their whole intent from the start came from a good place. Like their whole intention was, we got to get rid of the rich. So they started bombing places of elite in structures, like it was this part of Lima called Miraflores. They started going after them. So unfortunately, the way they did it, they went too violent and they started killing people. And then there was a segment that started even turning on other leftists, and all of this happened. And of course, then the CIA got involved, and there was money paid, and it was just a whole mess. And that's why Fujimori was able to do what he did, because his whole shtick was, I'm getting rid of these communists. Yeah. So that's why you kind of have that coming back now, so many years later, into the fold.
Interesting story. You better believe the West wants Fujimori. Is it Fujimoto or Fujimori? Fujimori. The West wants Fujimori to win right there. They want the capitalists to go in, to take over these mines, to profit off the natural resources, while the people of Peru, the workers, the everyday person, just lives in poverty and can't even feed their family. Castillo seems like he wants to change things around while going around these detours of the whole Shining Path kind of comparisons, whatnot. You know, and it's just very much, I hear when a lot of people talk about, you know, like a lot of Cubans in South Florida would always talk about, oh, how bad, what was his name? Leader of Cuba for so long.
Oh, Fidel Castro.
Castro, how bad he was, how awful he was. Well, you know, there's a certain way a country's going to react when you have the boot of Western imperialism on your neck.
Right.
You know, sometimes you can only fight fire with fire, and I'm not saying they're going to ever justify killings and deaths, but things will get really messy, especially if you're messing with the CIA and these three-letter agencies who don't care about life, who don't care what the average person of Peru does. They don't care how many people die in the mines. They don't care the fact that they're extracting all their resources. So this is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Fam, please let me know how long it takes a person to vote in Lima. I want to know from the time they get in line to the time they get out of there. And if they do it fast and expedient, I want to rag on the Americans for taking 5, 6, 7 hours. I'd love to see how that is. There's so many exciting things going on.
It's not like people bring each other ceviche because they're waiting in line 10 hours.
This is amazing. Do you still have your GoFundMe up, or is it?
It's still up. It's still up.
It's still up there. Fee has got a lot of help. But listen, ladies and gentlemen, we got to get her there. This is a really expensive trip. Please help her out. If you want to help me out, go to Georgia. Mine's a little bit smaller, so I'm not doing a GoFundMe. I'm just trying to take some love on the Cash App and the Venmo. You can go to it. You can see my address down there. Go to Yo Pasta. I have it tagged there. I have my 2 addresses. I want to thank you all. The other night, we had a little fundraiser, me and Ungi. It was awesome. I can't tell you the love that you guys have been giving us.
You guys are amazing.
Yeah, you guys are amazing. And please keep it going as much as you can, whenever you can. If you can't, just share our stuff. That's all we want to do, is we want to get this information out there.
Yeah.
We cover elections. And
I wish I had time to go to Venezuela too and hang out with Maduro and ask him some questions, but
fam, don't get me going.
I'm worrying so many people. People are like, oh my God, be careful.
Yes, please just come back safe.